This podcast contains potentially adult language, adult themes, definitely drinking, and possibly sexual context. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Drinking with Authors, the podcast. I am your host, Erica Lance. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Pretty please, I say that now while you're actually listening. So reach out and touch those little buttons on your phone that we'd appreciate, especially before you start drinking with us. And if you get a chance, leave a review. We're going to remind you at the end of the podcast when you're drunk to leave a review, because drunk reviews are the best reviews. Of course, if you want to be on the podcast, you can email us at drinkingwithauthors@gmail.com. Or if there's an author you'd like us to hunt down and find and get on the podcast, we will do the same. So email us, drinkingwithauthors@gmail.com. And our sponsor today is Skunk Brothers Spirits. Coupon code DWA10. They are amazing. They have some awesome recipes coming out for fall. So please, please, please check them out. And with that, my co-host today, I have to make up another word so it can go on the back of my shirt. The magnanimous, gotta write that one down. Magnanimous C.R. Rice is joining us today. And our guest today is Anna Sellheim. Okay.
Hi.
So let's talk about what we're drinking first, and then we'll talk about you. So in Drinking with Authors swag, which I think there's a contest that's going to come out soon so you can win some Drinking with Authors swag. I decided, because I just got over COVID, warning, there might be some coughs throughout this podcast. I greatly apologize, but is what I call gin and juice, but it's not really per the definition. It's grapefruit juice, and I put a little gin in it to, spice it up, and I have some water. CR, what are you drinking today? Because those cups you showed moments ago were amazing.
I'm doing like hot chocolate and Bailey's, and I don't want to run out. So I figured I would just make, and it's in my like holiday ones, because I get new ones every year. Corey's always like, you can do whatever you want, no big deal. If you break them, you get new ones next year. So this one was actually really cool. I'm a fan. It's like the Incurable Itch Wolf Claw powder. I'm a fan. Yeah. So I got two just in case.
Well, that's double fisting. We need to do that. Anna, what are you drinking?
I am drinking a giant ice water and a mini can of Diet Coke, because it is the middle of the week and I cannot get drunk until the weekend because I have a very hard time waking up the day next.
No, I understand. That's why we invented a podcast, so we can just say it's for celebrity reasons we get drunk.
It's part of our job description.
Yeah, exactly. Anna, tell the listeners who may not know what you write.
So I am a short form cartoonist located in Baltimore. I do mostly autobiographical work about mental health. I'm working on a book about both mental and physical disability and how it pertains to my artistic practice. And I occasionally do fiction as well. But I'm primarily a cartoonist that does narratives under 40 pages.
Very, very cool. So when did you decide to kind of go down these artistic endeavors?
So I have always been interested in comics. I read them voraciously. And then I found a meetup group called Square City Comics in DC. And I got involved with them, and I realized I wanted to take this really seriously, because I'd always loved the idea of making comics, and I'd done little fits and starts, but I had never really taken it incredibly or very seriously. And then my father had just died, and I had received a small inheritance, and I had been working at a wonderful day job at a rehabilitation center in Bethesda. And so I applied to get my MFA in comics from the Center for Cartoon Studies. And that was in 2000. So I started really making comics in 2013, and then started school 2014, graduated, and I've just been making comics ever since.
That's very cool, because I would think that's actually like a lot of kids' dream. Like, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to make comics. And very rarely do you meet somebody that got to fulfill that dream and grow up and make comics.
Yeah.
Very
Well,
true.
sorry.
You're
No, it's just I'm not necessarily professionally. I actually just started working in an AmeriCorps program as well, where I will be teaching. When does this come out?
I don't know.
Is it going
This
to be?
is going to be a surprise.
It's going to be a couple of months, but
Okay,
go
perfect.
ahead.
Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
It didn't happen like tomorrow.
No, it certainly will not be.
Okay, perfect. So I am currently in an AmeriCorps program that is partnering with MICA, the Maryland Institute College of Art. And so I will be teaching comics to a refugee program here in the city for middle school and high schoolers.
Very cool.
So that,
Nice.
yeah, so that'll be actually kind of my main source of income. I do make comics more as a passion hobby thing than as a career kind of deal.
No, that makes sense. So what are the comics that you make?
So I have my flagship series, Everything's Fine, which is about it's about my line for it is my uplifting and relatable look at anxiety and depression. But it really, I also am rapid cycle depressive bipolar, but when I didn't get that diagnosis until a couple years after, because I started actually understanding that bipolar disorder is a spectrum. And because I don't get manic, when I had first started seeing my psychologist, or psychiatrist, like a decade ago, they just called me a quote unquote unique case. The medications haven't really changed for the most part. But it's really just about mental health in general. I have a book called 3 Terrible Dogs about my 3 terrible dogs. They're terrible because they're poorly behaved, but they're perfect because they're dogs. I've got, oh my goodness, I am so sorry. Specifically turn that off. Where did I just put it? Oh, here it is. Very sorry. And I've done a zine about dreams. I did a zine horror story about a congressional intern because I have Senate intern experience, stuff like that. So it's a bunch of one-off things. And I've been in multiple anthologies as well.
Very cool. What about your writing? So you said you wrote like or biographical stuff, right? Mm-hmm. What have you written there?
So the autobiographical work is the book I'm working on. And the Everything's Fine series is autobiographical. I also do some prose comics criticism on a website called SoulRad, which is like a pay by article kind of deal. And then, yeah, the writing of everything else, all the other writing, I write everything except for The Intern. That horror congressional story was a collaboration between me and another writer.
Very, very cool. And what is the fiction you said you were working on?
So fiction-wise, the last fictional thing I did was called Normal, which is a 48-page zine about finding normalcy after the apocalypse. That is a fictional series that is very heavily influenced by COVID, but actually the idea came before COVID, but I used it as a way to process my feelings about COVID.
Okay.
So like a lot of my artistic practice is very therapeutic and kind of about processing multiple issues, which is also what I will be teaching as well, is some of the like therapeutic aspects of creating art and writing.
Okay.
Okay.
Very cool. So so going back, when did this all kind of start? When did you go, I'm going to create stories?
Okay. So this is actually what the book is about as well. I was isolated a lot as a child, either because of bullying or I have a bone disease called osteogenesis imperfecta. I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Unbreakable.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I have Samuel Jackson's disease, but I have a more mild version. So I have broken 7 major bones and then more fingers and toes than I can count. I've lost track of how many fingers and bones or toes. So in kindergarten, I broke my right leg, and in first grade, I broke my left leg. And because of that and bullying, I had to stay at the nurse's office during recess because of the broken leg. And then with bullying happening pretty much consistently throughout until probably the end of 6th grade, around there, maybe until the end of 4th grade or whatever. But I kind of used creating art and creating stories as a way to process and escape the trauma I was experiencing.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And everybody kind of needs something to escape, especially if you're in a bullying situation. And art seems to be the number one thing. Art and music are the number one things, which is a heck of a lot better than going to somebody smaller than you and beating the crap out of them. Because I think that's like the third option, isn't it? It's like you become a musician, an artist, or bully yourself.
Well, I think that so it's definitely one of the more healthier coping mechanisms, right? Like I have unhealthy ones too. For example, I had a binge eating disorder that I'm currently kind of unraveling. And like food was a coping mechanism as well. But in terms of creating art, I think that part of the reason that there are so many stories in writing and art and music in general about feeling isolated and alone is because I think people that create art and writing and music in any form of like creative people tend to be more hypersensitive. And I think a lot of them share like having those stories of isolation, which is part of the reason with the kids I'm teaching, I want them to also, not only am I teaching them comics, but I'm also nurturing a safe space where they can create their own therapeutic artistic practice to deal with, because these are all refugee children coming from all over the world. That Baltimore is a very big refugee city. And so I want to make it it's a two-pronged approach where you want to have them have a safe space where they can work through their trauma, even if it's not super directly, but also self-soothe through their artistic practice and grow it to be like a wonderful coping mechanism and also a form of self-expression as they're adults.
No, I think that's amazing. And that's going to be very helpful and touch a lot of lives. When you started doing comics, what was your inspiration?
So I read comic strips a lot as a kid. Really was into Dilbert, really loved Doonesbury, loved Garfield, obviously. Like it was kind of, I loved very strong opinions, loved Kathy, hardcore Kathy fan to this day. And then I think with a lot of my generation, in around like 99, 2000, a bunch of manga and anime started like flooding, the market in this country. Specifically with comics, it was really like superhero comics and comic book shops had really been seen as like a male only space. And so when manga and anime were introduced, a lot of it was geared towards women and like teenage girls flocked to it. And so I became really into like a lot of anime, but I was so young that like I didn't realize it's not a genre, it's a medium. And so I was consuming both a lot of really good stuff, but also a ton of garbage. And when I say garbage, I don't mean, message wise, it's problematic. What I mean is like, oh, this is like very poorly made and annoying and bad. And so I started taking around high school, I hadn't really internalized the problem. Oh, well, maybe you should curate both like just good manga and anime. But I kind of was like, I'm done with this completely. And I stopped reading it for like a decade. And I started going into what I would call like sad sack indie white boy comics, where like there'd be a guy and he'd be in the shower and he'd say, my girlfriend broke up with me and I'm sad. And then I masturbated in here. And, it's just kind of, and then you have 4 panels of him being sad in the shower, but I loved it and couldn't get enough of it. And then I kind of blossomed into, in the last few decades, I feel like, and obviously this is with prose writing too, a lot more voices that weren't maybe available in the early 2000s have become much more mainstream. And so really since that, like inception as a kid, I'm still heavily into independent comics, but primarily like self-published little zine stuff versus say a superhero series, which is something I'm not, unless it's really spectacular, I'm not going to be very invested in it. But yeah, so it's just started from childhood.
Very cool. What are some of your favorites?
So there's a manga that ended recently called oh goodness, it's Destruction. So in Japan, they like to shorten manga titles. They like to shorten manga titles to 3 sentences. There's 3 syllables. This guy made a manga that is so long, title-wise, that he didn't want it to get shortened, but it is shortened to Linda Perry is a author that's fabulous. Again, I think some early Kathy stuff is great. For Better for Worse is great. Stuff like that. Yeah.
So your comics that you've written, because Kathy and manga,
those are 2 very different things.
Ooh,
like
we
even
got
if you
2
go
different
like
sort of
shoujo,
sides.
SE to Yoi and shonen, like those, there are so many different types, and I don't think there is a manga that's anything like an actual comic strip.
So I will say that Tezuka did, there are comic strips, it's just like a lot of it's not translated into English. And I have a couple good ones of those. There's one called like, oh goodness. See if I could go to my bookshelf. I don't know if that's
we're not going to bookshelves because
that's totally fine. That's totally fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have a wide variety of like favorites. You know, when it comes to prose, the thing I've been like consuming recently is Stephen Fry's mythology trilogy. Yeah, and his reading on it in the book is just absolutely fantastic. My boyfriend, when it comes to prose, also has been getting me into Discworld, but like very curated. So
Discworld's amazing.
Yeah, so Unseen Academicals was wonderful, and it was actually really Unseen Academicals, speaking of like kind of the nerdy girl, like, you know, seeing themselves in what is the name of the protagonist? The protagonist in that book, that's kind of, but she's, so Juliet is a friend.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not her.
That's okay. CR will look it up. We'll have it in moments.
So I actually have that book.
The protagonist in that book is someone that works incredibly hard and is kind of underappreciated until
it's Mushroom.
People. I'm sorry?
Mushroom.
Yes. So, and I can see a lot of nerdy girls relating to that. And I kind of self-identified with that also as I was reading it, and then my mind was kind of blown when I really evaluated my life, because I really am not like that character, but she's so relatable in the core of like feeling of being underappreciated and actually being incredibly spectacular. So yeah, really when it comes to prose, I've been going through the Mythos series, and Discworld have been the last couple prose series. I can't really find confirmation that the Odyssey is coming out. Would you happen to know that as a literary podcast? If like Stephen Fry is doing the Odyssey?
I don't know. I don't know that. No.
I have.
Look it up, CR. Is Stephen Fry doing the Odyssey? Let's find out.
Yeah.
Live for our viewers. It's not live, it's recorded, but
yeah.
Live now.
And then, but yeah, I have like, there's just a bunch of really good.
Yeah, it says he's doing it. It says there's no chosen small themes. It will grapple with, you know, during this one man Odyssey love war peace, 3 shows in 1. That sounds really boring.
No, Stephen Fry makes it amazing. It's super catty and gossipy too. It's great.
Yeah,
but anyway, yeah, so I don't know. I can't think of any. Linda Berry's an all-time favorite, as I said.
What about okay. I think my question, maybe Hedjin, what are your comics like? Are they written more Magna style, or are they written more Kathy style?
No, neither. Mine are more sad sack indie style. Yeah. So I do, everything's fine is comic strips like Kathy, except there's a lot of swearing, and they're not necessarily all funny. But everything else is like a overarching narrative for the most part. I did a dream zine, which was a bunch of comics and art based on dreams, and the creating of it almost got me put in the Johns Hopkins Psychiatric Hospital, and that story is also in there.
Wow.
Well, so to get into it briefly, because it is really ridiculous. My mother was having with the bone disease, my mother was having experimental surgery. And this was in 2020. So I am like 31 years old. Or 32, whatever. So but this is New Year's Day 2020. And I am working on this dream zine, and I have one nightmare included, which is about because I wanted it to be overall positive, but I had a nightmare that was processing an argument I had with a friend. And in that comic, the comic character Nancy shoots somebody with a gun. And I was drawing that while my mother was in surgery. It turns out Johns Hopkins had a shooting a couple years prior, and there was a nurse that like completely flipped out and called in the head of the mental health facility and called in like security. They asked me to put the comic pages away. I did. And then they were calling all of my therapist and my psychiatrist, who both were saying I didn't have any violence in my past, but essentially they were treating me as though I had been a lone, isolated teen in school that was like drawings about shooting up their classmates. And the head surgeon that was working on my mother called them off and said, "You are being ridiculous. She's just an artist." But the story of that is also in that particular zine.
Wow. Well, that's a way to go about
Keeping
it.
it simple.
When life imitates art. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back with Drinking with Authors.
Sample locally sourced, quality distilled spirits in the beautiful Columbia River Gorge. At Skunk Brothers Distillery, we're family owned, brewing small batch grain to bottle spirits, just like our grandfather did back in the Prohibition era. From handcrafted bourbons and moonshine to flavored blends and cordials infused with local fruit. Join us for a tasting tour and buy Skunk Brothers spirits straight from the source.
It's all in the family at Skunk Brothers Spirits, located in Stevenson, Washington.
And we are back. So, you were talking about your literary. So, as far as you write a lot of narrative, but are you writing a full book now? Is that your goal with the
Yeah. So my full book, it's going to be about 150 pages. I'm working with an editor that has a couple of ideas. Like the indie comics community I'm part of is very small, but at the same time, indie comics, it is bizarre how both big and small independent comics are. So the editor I'm working with has some ideas of who will publish it. And it's about 150 pages, and it's essentially a bunch of short autobiographical stories about my relationship to art and how, like, so I talk about different art in the book as well as how it influenced my creative practice.
Okay.
So is it like a book? Do you also have drawings in it, or is it just a book?
Yeah, it's a graphic
Oh,
novel.
okay.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
I thought it was a fiction book. That's what
that's where I was getting off. Yeah.
No,
that's okay. It might be the gin and the Baileys, Chelsea. She's got the
Very
Diet
well could
Coke.
be. I have 2 cups. I'm trying to keep even.
Oh, trust what she's saying about what we're thinking, because that's a whole other thing. So, oh my goodness, my question. So what is your writing process? That's what I'm trying to ask, and the words don't seem to. Hello, COVID, didn't drink for a couple of weeks. I'm doing good. Okay. So what is your process?
It depends on the story. I'm a very intuitive writer. I refuse to even try to start any story unless the ending is completely crystallized in my mind. If I don't have an ending, I'm not pursuing a story. Comics take too much time. I don't have enough time in my lifetime to be like going down paths without an ending. In terms of fiction, usually I will collect little thoughts, put it in a note app or in my sketchbook. And same thing with autobio long term. And then there's thumbnailing, which is essentially the writing portion, like the rough draft, where you have the panel layout and then the writing is in the panel. And then most people have multiple steps after that. I just go straight to the drawing after that.
Okay. And I'm assuming you do the artwork yourself as well, right?
I do, yes.
Are you also the colorist?
Depends on if I'm working in color, yes. I'm not all of my stuff is in color. Like Normal is a black and white graphite created zine. Three Terrible Dogs is done in pen and ink and is a black and white zine. Everything's Fine is done in color. And yeah, all the color I do. Dream Zine has color and black and white. And all of that is done by me as well. Because for me, the writing is kind of the work that I don't want to do, but I have to do in order to get to draw. Because with the writing, you have to focus and be 100% present and concentrating. But once you can start drawing, there's a sense of being present, but you can also turn your mind off and listen to a podcast like yours and then just enjoy the meditative act of drawing.
That's very cool. Let's talk about feedback you've gotten on your comics. So when did you first hear feedback on any of the stuff you put out?
So before I went to school, really it was just kind of met with, kind of no one really cared. No one was particularly interested. At school, they weren't expecting a lot of me based on what I came in with. I think a lot of people were impressed with how quickly I developed and I became one of the stronger storytellers in my class. And then online, I started having some Tumblr comics that went viral. And throughout the years, just doing conventions and being on social media, I have what I would call like a very loyal but small audience. So they're an audience that really digs a lot of what I do, but it's not incredibly big. And then it runs a gamut in terms of reaction. Strangers might read a very short comic on my table and be like, this is the most intense thing in the world. And I'm going to put it down, ask if you're okay, and walk away. But then someone else will pick it up and be like, I feel seen in this. I'll give you my $6. Yeah, it really varies. I know that there's a lot of like larger name cartoonists that promote me and say, why isn't she a bigger deal? I get that question asked. It's always very sweet intended. It just is it makes you feel really weird. But yeah, so you run the gamut from people finding me. No one's really critiquing my art. I'm a good artist. People aren't really messing with that. But either if anyone has a problem with a piece of art or a piece of one of my comics, it's usually that it's too intense for them. Nothing in terms of like lack of quality. But I got a diehard like small fan base and I love them. And I've made so many connections through my work too, because it's for me, and I don't think this is common, but for me, comics is incredibly social. I've met most of my best friends. I'm part of a couple of comicking groups here in Baltimore and DC, and I met my boyfriend. Like I've met so many friends and family through comics. I'm going to be tabling. This is going to date this, but I'm going to be tabling at the Small Press Expo in Bethesda this weekend. So, but it is the largest small press comic convention on the East Coast. And like, I'm just so excited to see everybody. So yeah, that's a big thing also with my artistic practice that I'm very grateful for, is because I can't turn it off, and I can't turn my personality off no matter what. And it's gotten me both into trouble, but it's helped me really kind of establish a group of friends and family that I don't have to hide myself from. And because that's also in my work, if you're going to like my comics, you're going to like me. And so I've really kind of created a wonderful community with myself through my work, and I couldn't ask for anything more.
Well, do you do one shots like your do you do one shots for like your conventions and stuff, just to like bring people in and keep them interested for like that one special scene that maybe they wouldn't have before?
So actually, I have a Patreon, and the model of it is that I use the money to pay for printing costs for 100 zines. And they're not done based on, so whether I reorder them isn't based on how they sell at like one convention. But if I have a hard time moving something, I'm not going to reorder it versus something that I, sells very well. And obviously I'm going to be reordering it. So, and for me, the Patreon is such a amazing thing because I think that there's a very irritating aspect to certain people that talk about actually living in poverty, and where they pretend they're well off, but they pretend, they're poor because it's punk or whatever. But like, I am making only the AmeriCorps stipend, and then I'm on food stamps, I'm on rental assistance, like I'm on a lot of different programs. I am very poor. And literally that Patreon, because I make the $200 something it's per zine too. I don't do it every month, but because I have that $200 something to test run an 100 print run of anything I want to do, that is the only reason I can make comics, is that Patreon. So it's not done based for show, but again, after the Patreon zines are out to all the subscribers, depending on how it goes, there are a lot of comics I'll never reprint for sure that are out there.
That's very cool. So when you go to do the show, so Jen met you at the American Libraries Association conference.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
What was that like for you?
So that was a really interesting show. I've never been to anything like that before. My friend we were in the zine pavilion, me and my friend Teresa, who is also the co-host of my podcast, which is not nearly as polished a deal as this one, but we have a podcast called Make Art Talk Shit, where we make art and talk shit, and then we'll have guests on to make art and talk shit. That was really interesting because I just didn't know anything about it. I didn't have to pay for that convention, and I understand that there are people that pay for weekend passes, which are like over $200, but it's because they're getting thousands of dollars in books for free. Like, I get it. I thought it was incredibly well run. It was a total blast. It was just a huge eye-opening experience. I didn't get a lot of free books. I did go to, before I hadn't started AmeriCorps yet, so I went to their resume and career advice center, which is very helpful as well. So yeah, I thought it was great, but it's nothing like any other show I've done before. We were just there to sell zines, but I reconnected with old friends. I'm friends with Tilly Walden, and I hadn't seen her forever. She's doing a signing for Clementine, which is The Walking Dead's new graphic novel or something like that. And I saw a bunch of my old friends at big publisher tables. But yeah, that show was really great, and I met a lot of cool people.
And how was, because it's the American Libraries Association, so it's a somewhat conservative crowd in a way, to a degree, right? How do you think how did it go with you and your zines and stuff like that with that crowd? I'm not saying all librarians are conservatives, so no hate mail, thank you very much. I'm just saying in general, some of them tend to be, scholastically geared and things like that. So
yeah, I was actually surprised by how progressive everybody was personally. But then again, I don't have a lot of kids zines. So if you're looking for children's literature, I don't really have, besides 3 Terrible Dogs, I don't really have a ton of stuff to offer you. I was shocked that I sold anything because the Zine Pavilion was one of the few places you could pay for a book. They're giving out so much free stuff, but they had amazing tote bags everywhere, but people love my tote bags enough. They were buying my tote bags. But I think, the best anecdote I think I got was, I don't know if you're familiar with Rupi Kaur, the poet. Okay. She's an online Instagram sensation. And now all poets want to be like Rupi Kaur. No capitalization because of aesthetic reasons. But we had, and it's kind of, it's it's very much kind of seems like teen baby's first dramatic poem, where it's obvious she went through some stuff, but it's kind of it's just kind of dramatic, and it's very Instagram. And we did a spoof of her zine for a zine for our podcast called Half and Half, because her book is called Milk and Honey.
Okay.
And so we had that zine, and a librarian picked it up, and she was like, oh my God, I love this. And she says, I have my teenagers love Rupi Kaur, and all I can think is, at least they're reading. But in terms of there were a lot of, I was in line for an LGBTQ themed book for teens that was coming out from DC, and I was listening to 2 authors based in rural Georgia that were looking for more queer books for their kids, and they were so excited about it. And they actually name dropped a couple friends of mine that didn't do queer books, but my friend Robin Smith did a Wonder Woman book no, it's not Wonder Woman. It's not Wonder, but they did a book with DC that was very like Black centric with a Black character. And so I was like surprised to hear that kind of thing. So I didn't really experience any of the conservatism. I know that there was an incident with somebody else in a different area, because the table across from me, or the table next to me, was asked to like help console somebody that was very bigoted about having LGBTQ stuff in children's work that had approached them. But in terms of my personal experience, I didn't deal with any conservative audience at all. But I think that's another thing, is if you interact with me for 5 seconds, I'm not gonna like vibe with you, and you're probably just gonna move on, as opposed to confront me or give bad feedback. You're just like, oh, thanks, and then you leave. So
No, that makes sense. Have you looked at or have you pushed your books to go through a comic sort of distributor versus doing the zines?
So I'm part of one I'm part of one distribution service. So comic distribution services are different than normal prose distribution services, because a lot of time the rules for comic books are different in terms of they can't return unsold books. So there was a monopoly until recently. But like in terms of large chains, they're only dealing with either publishing houses that deal with both prose books and graphic novels, so say like Random House, or they're dealing with a distributor called Diamond. But when you go into your local shop, you have a lot of smaller distribution companies. So there is a guy named Billy who is doing he's creating a distro right now. It's in the works, and I will be part of that. But personally, I like going to places and putting stuff, like going to comic shops and putting stuff on consignment that way. Some of the anthologies I've been in deal with different distros as well, right? Because some of them have actually been like well acclaimed and won awards and stuff like that. But it's not that I'm against it. I really just didn't have. I haven't really pursued it very much. I'm looking to do that more in the future.
That makes sense. Okay, Chelsea, final question, and then we're going to do shameless self-promotion time.
Do you want to draw something different than what you are now? Like, I know you said you do a lot of like mental health, and you do the stuff with your dogs and all that. Have you ever thought of doing like a manga style thing, since you did enjoy it for such a long period of time?
Am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
Of course you're fucking
Of course.
Well, I don't know, man. I'm new.
We've sworn like 9 times.
Gin.
Okay.
What?
So anytime a Westerner tries to make manga, it looks like shit. So no, I'm not going to try anything manga related. That being said, normal.
But it's just a drawing style.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, but what I mean, I do fiction as well. Fiction is way more fun to draw. So I like drawing fiction better. Everything's Fine is done with an abstract avatar, because that is more fun to draw than than say myself literally. My next story idea, there's 2 projects I can work on next, and both of them are going to be fictional. I haven't decided which one I'm doing yet, but I definitely enjoy drawing fiction more because I like drawing people in cool clothes, and I don't have cool clothes. That's kind of the deal. But honestly, like a big thing is that with my products that I have tabling, my buttons and my stickers, tote bags, that's where I get out a lot of the drawing, like stuff that isn't me, like I have a puzzle I did that's just kind of a group scene, stuff like that. And that is where I really get to go unleash kind of the non-Anna specific art. But that being said, I cannot wait for this book to be done because I've been working on it for like over a year. And I want to be able to draw anything. I do get to draw cool stuff in it. Like I got to draw, oh my goodness, Anna, what is the name? Lamasu from like Assyria, that kind of thing. But yeah, whatever my next project is, I'm definitely taking a break from autobio and going to be doing a fictitious story for sure.
Very cool. Okay, shameless self-promotion time. How do people find you? Talk about your Patreon, your websites.
Oh God, I feel like this is so I'm at annasellheim.com. You can read a lot of my comics for free at annasellheim.com. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, and Tumblr at Anna Sellheim. My Patreon is also at Anna Sellheim, and my Patreon is per product. So you're not getting charged per month. You are getting charged every time I do a zine. The range in prices is from $1, which is just a donation, $3. You get a digital copy of every zine I do. $10, you get a physical copy of any black and white zine I do and a digital copy. $15, you get both every color and physical copy and digital copy of every color and black and white zine I do. And then a crazy tier where you get original art at $100 per project. And I come out with zines probably 4 to 6 every year.
Wow.
Oh, that's very cool. Awesome. Well, you have been so much fun. First time zine person on the podcast.
I have to say, yeah.
Well, who do you primarily, are you 2 authors as well? You're just getting drinking with authors. What kind of work do you do?
Well, okay, just to sum up about us. I write horror.
Very cool.
Horror that doesn't have happy endings. I was at Dragon Con on a panel and I said that, and somebody from the audience was like, I love you. And I was like,
that's great.
Cool.
That's great.
Yeah, it was awesome. And then I also write under a name Dahlia Lance. I write humorous erotica.
Oh,
so
wow.
Those are the 2 genres that I write. And I write nonfiction stuff too, that will be coming out later this year. CR, what do you write?
I have been switched. I think my new category is young adult dark metaphysical. So it's basically dark fantasy. It's super fun.
So
yeah.
I think it also depends on what Amazon decides your category is, right?
Yes, it is switched. It depending on what it gets switched to, depends on like my ranking and stuff. But yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Very cool.
Talk about yourself on the podcast at all?
Every now and then we do. You should. You gotta listen to more episodes of podcasts.
I will. I'm on a backlog of a different podcast. I will make sure to catch up on this. It's just
that would be good.
I feel like with shameless self-promotion plug time, you got to plug your own stuff.
Oh, trust me, we get drunk and talk about ourselves a lot. People are used to us. It's fine. But this has been Drinking with Authors. I've been your host, Erica Lance. My magnificent co-host, I think I've used that one before, is CR Rice. She's putting all these on a t-shirt, so it's only going to be mildly awkward. Our amazing guest has been Anna Sellheim. Don't forget to like and subscribe to us. If you haven't already done that, hit that button right now. And now that you've been drinking along with us, don't forget to leave us a review. I've decided I only want drunk reviews of the show. Just kidding. If you're sober, you can write a review as well. Our sponsor has been Skunk Brothers Spirits, coupon code DWA10. Check them out. And we will see you guys next time.